Hey, what's up everybody? In this video tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at how to create a hot chocolate mug assembly. It's going to be full of hot chocolate. We're going to have whipped cream on top. It's going to have our marshmallows in it and a candy cane as a garnish. What's cool is that our hot chocolate mug is also going to have a decal, and we're also going to emboss or deboss a message on it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get started with a new folder. We're going to call this our hot chocolate mug assembly. I'm just going to go ahead and put a 2 on this just as an indicator to me. And then once we create that folder, I'm going to go ahead and just open this up. And I'm going to first come out here and save my new design as hot chocolate mug. All right, so once that is done, what I'm going to do is create a sketch, and I'm going to start here right on the bottom of our work plane. We're going to build this from the bottom up, and we're going to create a circle here at the base, and that's going to be a distance of 3.25. I'm going to finish the sketch, and I'm going to extrude this up a distance of 3.5, okay, for extrusion. So now we need to make the chamber, the cavity inside of our mug, and the easiest way to do that is just by using shell. So we're going to pick shell, pick the top of the face, and now we're going to tell it what its thickness is, which is 0.25, and I'm going to say OK. All right, so looking at any hot chocolate mug, you're going to see there's no sharp corners on it. Everything's going to be rounded over, so I'm going to use fillet, and I'm going to pick this edge, the inside chamber edge, and the bottom edge here, and apply a fillet radius of 0.125. Okay, so our main mug part, the body of it, is done. So what we have to do now is create our handle that's going to be on the side of this. All right, so in order to do that, I'm going to come out here and pick on origin to turn it on. Underneath construct, I'm going to be seeing something here called tangent plane. I simply pick the face, and now I'm going to pick the work plane that I want to use as a reference so it knows the orientation. So I'm going to pick on that and just simply put OK, and now we can see that plane is there. I'm going to now create a sketch on this work plane. Okay, and now I'm going to come up, use create, come down to something called slot, and I'm going to pick on center point slot. Hovering over the origin, I'm going to bring this straight up, and I'm now going to come out and bring this up to create the slot. Okay, so the distance I want to use for this line here is going to be a distance of 0.5. Now when I do that, I can see how it slides it to the right or to the left. So now that means we're going to have to use something called a sketch constraint. I'm going to pick on the first one here for vertical, and I'm going to say I want this point and this point to be vertically aligned, and they do. Okay, now this is when I can come out and dimension our arc on the end. I want this to be 0.125. And the last thing I need to do is make sure I have the distance away from the origin. So I'm going to use a dimension from the origin to the center point, and I want that to be 1.25. It's going to go up towards the top. I'm going to finish up with the sketch and look at this in a home view. So now I'm going to extrude this new profile I have in. Now when it does that, it's going to be acting as a cut. We don't want that to be a cut. We want that to be a join. Okay, we're also taking a look at this, and we can now see that that is now going into the cavity of our mug. That's going to be no good. So I'm going to flip this from distance to object, and then all I have to do is pick the face that I want to extrude to and say OK. So now there's a small platform there. Okay, so now that we have that done, okay, I'm going to create a sketch on this work plane that goes right through the center of the mug. Since I have material in the way to that work plane, if we look at it here, okay, what I'm going to do is come over and use this thing called slice. I'm going to orbit this over just a little bit, and underneath create, I'm going to come down and find project. I'm going to pick on this face, and I'm going to say OK. When that happens, you're now going to see that there's a small dot here and here, and if we look close enough, there's some purple geometry making up a line here. That's going to help us because you're going to be using lines starting from the midpoint, that's the triangular snap, and I'm going to draw out just a line a little bit like so. Now, using spline, I'm going to start from this endpoint and I'm going to create the path that I want to use to create my handle. When I bring this in, I don't want to bring it to the surface. Instead, I'm going to bring it in halfway through my wall, and I'm going to say OK. So this is the point now when you can start going to your grips and you can start manipulating this path to give it the shape that you want. Once I'm done with that, I can finish the sketch, orbit this over. Underneath Create, I can find Sweep. I can pick the face, and then underneath Profile, I can see a select box for path. I'm going to pick on it, and now I'm going to pick my path. By default, it's going to want to cut. Switch it to Join and say OK, and now we have our handle for our mug. Okay, at this point, this is when you should be coming up, switching this to a physical material. It's not going to be the best material for this, but I'm just going to go ahead and apply an ABS plastic, and I'm going to change the ABS plastic color to the color of my choice. This is looking Christmassy, so I'm going to make this a red mug. I'm going to say OK, apply, and get out. So now this is when I can close out on this and I can do a save, and it's going to save the hot chocolate mug. Okay, so now that that mug is done, okay, now what we have to do is work on the liquid that's going to go inside of the mug. So an easy way to do this is by coming out here and creating a sketch on this plane that goes right down through the center of our mug. I'm once again going to come over here and slice this, and then I'm going to come up underneath Create. I'm going to find Project, and I'm going to project this main face forward as well as this small little face below it. I'm going to say OK. Okay, it is projected forward. It's hard to see it, but what you're going to do is you're going to highlight everything here. You're going to do a copy, and you're going to finish the sketch. Now this is the point when I can create a new design, start a sketch on a work plane, right-click in the white space, and say Paste. So now this is the inside chamber of my mug. So I'm going to draw a line starting from the top, go to the bottom. I'm now going to reinvent my fillet by using 3-point arc, come to this point, and I'm going to drag out until I see a tangent symbol, which looks just like that. Okay, I'm going to draw a line starting from this endpoint, take it to the top. Now the issue that we have is that right now my hot chocolate is going to go all the way to the top of my mug. There are things I want to put in my hot chocolate like whipped cream, marshmallows, and a candy cane, so I need to give myself some clearance at the top. So I'm now going to draw a line, okay, just getting it off the top, and I'm going to send it straight over. Now, since we're talking about liquid, all right, I want it to look like liquid in my 3D model, so I don't want it to just be a flat top. So instead, I'm going to use spline, start from this intersection here, and I'm going to create this ripple pattern across the top to make this look like a true fluid. Once I get to the end, I hit OK, and now I can delete this horizontal line that I use as a reference. Everything else is ready to go. So I'm going to finish the sketch, put this into a home view, use revolve, and I'm going to pick this profile, but we cannot forget to pick on this profile. I'm going to select my axis, which is my vertical, and I'm going to send that around the full 360 degrees. So we're looking good. So at this point, I would call this my hot chocolate liquid. Okay, we obviously need a material to make it look like hot chocolate, so we're going to right-click on this, come out here using physical material. We're going to now come back down to ABS plastic. Now I can right-click on ABS plastic that's being used in this design. I can do an edit, go into advanced, go into appearance, and change this to a chocolate color. I can say OK on that, hit apply and cancel out, close out of my physical material dialog box, and now I can go ahead and save this as hot chocolate liquid. So my liquid is done. So now I'm going to create a new design, and I'm going to save this as hot chocolate mug assembly. Okay, once I have saved that, now I can open up the data panel. I can bring my hot chocolate mug in. I'm going to drag this off of the origin, say OK, and since this is my first part in, I must right-click on it in the browser and pick on ground. A lot of students will ask me, why is this work plane showing up in the assembly? Well, it's because we left that origin folder on in the original part. We can also see sketches are coming over as well, so we can come down in here and we can turn off those sketches and we can do a save. Once we go back into the assembly, it's going to see it wants to update. So I can hit the update, now everything is off, and we're on our way with our assembly. So opening up the data panel, I can drag in my hot chocolate liquid. I can leave it right where it's at. I can say OK. I'm going to close the data panel. I'm going to orbit this over, come up here, and I'm going to put the hot chocolate in the mug. I'm going to do that by using the joint origin that's at the bottom face of the liquid. I'm going to orbit this over and find the joint origin that's at the bottom face of the mug. You're going to see how it slides in. Now, just to make sure that both of these parts are working together and they're not intersecting, is I can come up here, go underneath Inspect, and find something called Interference. With interference, we can select our parts using a selection window, and now I can come to this button called Compute, and it's going to tell me whether or not there have been interferences that are detected. If no interferences are detected, that means we have two parts that are lined up perfectly and they are not overlapping. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and do a save. Okay, so we have the liquid in the mug. Now what we have to do is start worrying about putting all of our toppings in it. So one of those is going to be whipped cream. All right, we've already created something that looks like whipped cream, but it's actually icing in the cookie cake. So what I'm going to do is open up my data panel. I'm going to come out of here and I'm going to find my cookie cake. I'm going to scroll down until I find my cookie cake icing dollop. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say copy. I'm going to jump out of this project just temporarily and I'm going to jump back in, and now I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find my hot chocolate mug assembly folder and I'm going to copy it over. We can see that item has been copied successfully, so we're going to jump back in here, go to my hot chocolate mug assembly, and we're going to see that my icing is there. Since this is no longer icing, I'm going to right click on it, come to rename, and I'm going to call this whipped cream. I'm going to open this now because we can see some of us probably added a color to our icing. Now I'm going to come out here and I'm going to go into physical material. I'm going to grab ABS plastic, which is white, all right, and I'm now going to do an override on that and do a save. So the issue we have at this point is that this was being built for a cookie cake, which means our icing is probably small little pieces. We're looking for a good amount of whipped cream that we're going to put on top of our hot chocolate. So it means we're going to have a scaling issue at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to my timeline. I'm going to right click on my first sketch and pick on Edit Sketch. I'm just going to draw myself a reference circle from the center to the outside of those points. I'm now going to dimension what that circle is, and I can see in my case it is 1/2 inch. I think on that assignment, I think we made the base requirement like 3/4 of an inch or an inch. So I'm just wanting to get to know what that diameter is, because what I'm now going to do is I'm going to draw from the same origin the diameter of our hot chocolate mug, which was 3.25. Okay, I'm now going to offset this in the distance of our wall, which was -0.25. And basically now this is telling us that our whipped cream, or the part we're using for whipped cream, is only this size when compared to the mug, which is a very small size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle starting from the origin, and I'm going to start taking a look at this and start looking at the dimensions to see something that's going to be probably a little bit more appropriate for it. I'm awfully close to 1.5, so I'm going to type in 1.5. So what that is telling us now is that now if we scaled this up for it to come out to this location, I'm going to have this area here to put in my mini marshmallows and my candy cane. So 1.5 is the new dimension I want that diameter to be for our whipped cream. Okay, so I'm going to use calculator. I'm first going to be starting with the dimension I want this to be now, the new dimension, which is 1.5. I'm going to divide that by its current dimension, so in my case is 0.5, and I hit enter. That's now telling us we're going to have to scale this up 3 times. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of my geometry that I was just using for reference. I'm going to finish my sketch. I can now see my model, and I'm going to look at this in the home view. Underneath modify, we can see that there is a feature out here called scale. I'm going to use scale, select my object, and my scale factor I calculated was going to be a scale factor of 3. So now scaled this up 3 times. I'm going to say OK. Last thing I need to do is to do a save. And now I can jump over into my assembly. Using my data panel, I'm going to drag over my new scaled size for whipped cream. I'm going to say OK. Closing the data panel, I'm now going to come in here, use my joint, find the joint origin at the bottom of the whipped cream, and I'm going to take that and place that the joint origin at the bottom of the mug. Apparently, my whipped cream is in the wrong orientation, so I can flip it with the flip button. I'm going to nudge this over and orbit it over where I can now look into the top of my mug. Using my arrow, I can now pull this up, and now I'm going to see how the whipped cream is coming up through the liquid. I'm going to zoom in close. Using the arrows, I'm going to pull this down, and you're now going to start seeing a little bit of a shadow here. That shadow is indicating the liquid line, in our case, for our hot chocolate. I want that bottom of our whipped cream to just be below the surface. Okay, once I have it in that orientation and that distance, I'm going to say OK. All right, we're doing that just to keep that whipped cream from levitating above the liquid or above the mug. We want this to be realistic. So I'm at this point. Now is probably a good time to hit our save button and OK. So now we need to move on to creating our mini marshmallows. So I'm going to create a new design, start a sketch, pick on a face, and I'm going to say that my diameter for my mini marshmallow is going to be 0.25 inches, starting right from the origin. I'm going to finish the sketch, look at this in the home view. I'm going to use extrude, and I'm going to pull this up a distance of 0.375. I'm now going to be using fillet, and I'm going to fillet the top and the bottom edge, a fillet radius of 0.02, and say OK. All right, at this point, we could go out there and use the cheater method like we've always been using of applying like white ABS. But if we applied white ABS to it, it's going to be shiny and reflective, so that doesn't make a lot of sense for a marshmallow. So instead, I'm going to cheat this time by coming up and going into appearance, not physical material, but appearance. And when we go into appearance, we can now come down and we can find our paint folder. One of the options of paint folder is called powder coat rough. There's all sorts of different options here. Now, you might have to download something first in order for it to be accessible. Otherwise, you can drag any color for that powder coat rough onto the marshmallow. Obviously, our marshmallows are not black, so I'm going to right-click, edit, and I'm now going to change this to a white color on that swatch palette. I can close out of this, and now I can do a save, and I can call this mini marshmallow. So my marshmallow is done, but here's the issue. Right now, the joint origins, when we bring it into the assembly environment, are all going to be oriented as the top one here all throughout the marshmallow, which means they're going to be bobbing up and down vertically. And we all know when you put a marshmallow in hot chocolate, it's going to be on its side and not vertically aligned like I was talking about. So what we have to do is create our own joint origin to use with our marshmallow. So in order to do that, we're going to turn on our origin folder. I'm going to construct a tangent plane. I'm going to pick on our curved surface, and now I'm going to reference this work plane here and say OK. Okay, so now that work plane is there. I now want to place a joint origin on this work plane in the middle, but the problem is that I need a geometric location to actually place it. So a good geometric location that we can use is by creating a sketch on the work plane. Underneath create, we can find point. We pick point and we place a point right here directly above the origin, and we can finish the sketch. So now we have the geometry that we can use. We can come up here underneath a symbol and we can find joint origin. I pick joint origin and come over here and place it right on top of that point and say OK. And now we can see that that joint origin is located or oriented 90 degrees from what it would be on the top. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to turn off my origin folder and I'm going to save. Back into our assembly, I'm now going to bring in my mini marshmallow. I'm going to say OK, and if we look at our mini marshmallow, we can see our joint origin. So I'm going to use joint, pick the joint origin, and now I'm going to come here to the bottom of my mug and I'm going to attach it to the bottom. When looking at this in the front view, now we can see, if I do the flip, now we can see that my marshmallow is now in a horizontal orientation and not vertical, which is great. And now all I have to do is pull this up into a location. I can look at this in the top face of the view cube, and now I can use my arrows, get this into a location that I want. And now I'm going to pull this down until I start seeing those shadows for that liquid line. And if you want, you can also use the dial, okay, to rotate this into a random orientation. I can say, okay, I can see that is floating. All right, so you're going to continue doing the same thing until you have a minimum of 5 marshmallows that are put into the hot chocolate. So I'm going to do one more for reference. Open my data panel, find my mini marshmallow, drag that in, say OK, use my joint, find my origin, and place it at the bottom of our mug. It's laying flat, so now I'm going to go ahead using my arrows and pull that up. I can send this over, get it into a different location, even look at this in the top if I want, make sure it's not intersecting with anything. Continue to pull this up until I see that liquid line that's going against the marshmallow. And then obviously to make this look more realistic, I can nudge this in a different direction than what's already out there, like so, and I can say OK. So it's also going to be floating in the liquid. Now, what you cannot use in this case is going to be circular pattern, because these are all going to be oriented in this perfect sort of pattern. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for randomness, exactly what we would find with hot chocolate. Okay, so once that's done, once we have 5 or more, make sure to leave enough room for a candy cane, by the way, we can go ahead and do a save. Okay, so now that that is done, now we need to start working on the mug. So I'm going to open up just my mug part by itself, not assembly, but mug. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is go out, okay, and I'm going to find a logo that I can use. So I'm just going to type in LTHS logo. That's the one I'm looking for. I can look at images. I'm going to find the image that I'm wanting. I can right click and do a save image as. Now, the only types of images that you can use are true image files: JPEGs, bitmaps, PNGs, and TIFFs. You cannot use JFIFs or JFIFs. You cannot use HTMLs. It has to be a true image. My suggestion to you is to find a bitmap, a JPEG, or a PNG. Once you have found that, go ahead and save that to your computer like the desktop, okay, and go ahead and hit save. So back in the Fusion environment, this is when we can insert a decal. I said nothing about canvas. No canvas in this case. We want this to be a true sticker or dye sublimation that we can put on that cup. So I'm going to say decal. I'm going to say insert from my computer. I'm going to find that image that I've been wanting to use for my logo and say open. And all I have to do now is pick on the face that I want that logo to go on. I can now look at this in the front view. Okay, I can use this option to move it. I can use this option to rotate it. And I can use the top corner to scale it. Just make sure it is on the dead center of this face. Don't forget to uncheck chain faces and say OK. Now the decal is on there. What you're also going to be doing is embossing or debossing a message on this. It's going to be like lettering. So it's either going to be embossed, which is raised off the surface, or it's going to be debossed, which is engraved into the surface. So in order to do that, I'm going to flip it to the opposing side of the cup or the mug. Okay, I'm going to turn on my origin folder. I'm going to construct a tangent plane by picking on the face and referencing this work plane here. Now, the problem that we have is that the work plane's on the other side. So using my dial, I'm going to bring this around -180 degrees, and I'm going to say OK. I can now create a sketch on this new work plane that I've created. Underneath create, we can find this black letter here. This is text. I'm going to pick it once at the top left-hand corner and pick it a second time at the bottom right-hand corner once you have verified that that text box has been centered in that face. You can type in your message. So in my case, I'm going to call this Lockport Porters. I'm going to make sure it's middle center justified. I could bold and italicize it, and then I also have the ability to change the font. Pick a good height. When I'm talking about a good height, I'm wanting a height that's not going to go past this face because it's going to wrap around the backside of the mug. That's going to now interfere with your fingers under the handle. So pick an appropriate height that's going to be keeping that on that front face. I'm now going to say OK, and I'm going to finish my sketch. Okay, so for the next part of this, I'm going to come to create, come down to emboss. All right, and now I need to select my sketch profile. So that would be my text alone. I'm now going to hit the select box and pick on the face that I want that to emboss to. Okay, now this will not work if tangent chain has been selected. So you might have to uncheck tangent chain before you even select your sketch profiles and your faces. Just a warning. So right now we can see that this is in the deboss mode. So if I zoom in here, I can see it's being cut in. All right, if I flip to emboss, it's going to raise the lettering outside of the mug. All right, so what that means is you have to pick a good depth where this is going to look realistic. Because if I just typed in 2, it's going to wrap it to that face and extrude it off that face too. Obviously, this is not going to work. It's going to be very small dimensions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and say I want to engrave this like deboss. And I'm also just going to put this in a smaller engraved surface. So -0.01 for me. I'm liking the look at that. Now I can go ahead and say OK. So now that that has been done, we can see how it has been engraved. The problem is it's going to be adopting the same material that I used to create this, which would be that ABS plastic that's been changed red. So since we want that lettering to pop, even if it is embossed or debossed, what we're going to do is right-click, and we're going to go into Appearance. So I'm right on this face. I'm going to right-click and pick on Appearance. Now we're going into our appearances. We need to first switch this to go to Faces. Okay, now this is when I can come out here, go into Paint. I can find like metallic, any sort of color that you want. I want this to look like a gold. So I'm going to pick on Paint Metallic Yellow, take it to the face, and now we can do the override. I can do this for every single face that's going to make up the bottom of that letter with that engrave. Continue the same process until you have all those faces painted the way that you want. Okay, you can repeat the same process if you want a different color for this down here, but I think you get the idea on engrave with the appearance override. Now we can go ahead and do a save. All right, so once we have saved that, we can now go back into the assembly. Okay, I can do an update. All right, and now that's all going to be updated within our assembly. Now, a question I get a lot is why am I still seeing the work planes? Well, if you go back into any of your parts and your origin folder is still on, all right, that's going to be showing up in the assembly. So I'm going to shut it down here in the part. I can do a save, okay, and now I can jump back over into my assembly. I can update it, and now that work plane is going to go away from my origin. Okay, so now's a good chance to do a save here. Okay, so now we're at a point now where we can finish all this up by just creating our last piece that we're going to need for our hot chocolate mug assembly, and that's going to be a candy cane. So the candy cane is going to be used as a garnish, but it's also going to be a piece of candy for us to have within that hot chocolate mug. So what you're going to need for this is an image to use and just a little bit of research on basically what a candy cane kind of looks like. All right, so if you take a look out here on Google Classroom, you will see I provided an image to you of a candy cane. So you're going to have to download that, and you're going to have to use that. Save that to your computer, and then you have to take a look at what the normal dimensions are for a candy cane. So candy cane diameter is going to range anywhere from a 1/4 of an inch up to a 1/2 of an inch, and they're saying that the standard size for most candy canes, they have a height of about 6 inches. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to use a 1/4 inch diameter and 6 inches for our height. So jumping back into Fusion, I'm going to be creating a new design. I'm going to start a sketch here. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give myself a reference line that's going to be 6 inches tall. That's going to help me size my candy cane to the size it needs to be. So now I'm going to come out using insert. I'm going to bring in a canvas. I'm going to insert from my computer, and I'm going to come out here and find my candy cane image that I just downloaded from Google Classroom, and I'm going to place it onto this work plane here. So obviously now I can scale this up, and I can move this, and I can kind of get things where I kind of need for them to be. I'm trying to get this candy cane really close to that 6 inch distance that I have here. All right, and we can see it's pretty close there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and accept that exactly where it's at. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to draw a line starting from the origin, and I'm going to keep my line going right down through the center of this candy cane where it remains straight. Okay, once I have that line created, I'm now going to use spline, start it from the end point, and I'm just going to continue along the center of this path to make our candy cane path. So I'm going to bring this around all the way to the end here, keeping it right down the center, get it close, and I'm going to go ahead and just say okay. All right, so we have the path that we're wanting to use for our candy cane. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just put a tangent constraint between this spline, if I can get it, there we go, and this line here. All right, just want to make sure that that is actually tangent. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and finish that sketch. And now what I'm going to do is turn on my origin, find a work plane on the bottom. I'm going to create a sketch on this work plane, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle. That circle needs to have a diameter of 0.25. All right, so the issue is that the candy cane, all right, as we know, has a stripe. Okay, a couple stripes actually. And it's going to be composed of two different types of materials. So right now, if we just kept it at a circle, there's going to be no way for us to apply two different appearance overrides of red and white, okay, just to that one single surface. So we have to build this into our profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line out, and it's just going to be just beyond, draw a circle out. It's just going to be beyond our current circle. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep this at like 0.26 for my diameter. I'm now going to draw a line starting from the top of the circle, okay, and I'm going to take this all the way down to the bottom of the circle. I'm going to do the same thing for the left side and kick it over to the right side. Now I can use trim, and I can trim out this portion of it, and I can trim out this portion of it. Okay, I can also trim out this portion of it and trim out this portion of it. So that's the profile I'm going to be looking for. So you can see that, two opposite sides of this are going to be sticking out, or these two opposite sides are going to be in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up with the sketch. Okay, now what I'm going to be doing is coming out, and I'm going to be using sweep. Okay, obviously this is going to be my profile here and here, here and here. Okay, and then I'm going to select on my path. So that's going to be this path right here. Oops, I left my vertical line in. So let's go back in and let's repair that sketch. It's going to be on my first sketch. Let's get rid of that vertical. We're no longer going to need it. All right, now let's try it. So now let's use our sweep. Here's our profile. I'm going to select my path. It's going to send it along that path. Everything's looking good, but the problem is right now there's no twist to it. So let's go ahead and put in a twist angle to it. So I'm going to start out at 180 degrees. We can see how it is twisting. I'm going to go with the full 360. Okay, just be taking a look at it. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and just say okay. All right, so everything is done here. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off my canvas. I'm also going to turn off my origin, and now that's going to be leaving us with a candy cane that looks like so. All right, so I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to come down, go into my physical material, and I'm going to just find my ABS plastic, and I'm going to apply it to it. Now I'm going to close. Okay, so obviously we have two sides that we're going to want to make sure are red. So I'm going to be picking on one of these sides. I'm going to right click, come down, go into appearance. Okay, I'm going to be using my ABS plastic, so I'm going to duplicate it, and now I'm going to right click on this and do an edit, and I'm going to say I want this to change to a red color. And I'm going to say done. I'm going to switch my apply to over to faces, and now I'm going to drag that red onto the face that I want this to be. Okay, obviously that's also going to have to be on the other side as well. So I'm going to drag the red over to this face and drag the red to this face. Okay, and now we're going to have something that looks like a candy cane. All right, and I don't know about you, maybe we want to make a little bit more twist to it. So I can always right click, go into my sweep, and I can edit the feature. And I can go ahead and put a little bit more on it. So I'm going to just go 540 on this. I'm going to add an additional 180. I'm going to say OK to this, and now it's going to be a really good twist. Okay, so obviously we're done with this, so I'm going to go ahead and do a save. And I'm just going to call this candy cane. All right, so my candy cane is done. Now I can go back into my assembly. Okay, and obviously now we can go ahead and insert in my candy cane. So my candy cane is in. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the data panel, and now I can go ahead and insert the candy cane into the mug. So now I'm going to use joint, come in here to my bottom face of my candy cane, and now hook that up with the joint, the bottom of my coffee mug. Okay, so obviously our direction is wrong, so I can go ahead and do the flip. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say OK on that. All right, so obviously our candy cane is sticking there in the middle. You could leave it there. But I think what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to place it over towards the side of the coffee mug. So now what I'm going to do is right click on this. I'm going to edit the joint, look at this from the top edge, and now I'm going to go ahead and start using my arrows, and I'm going to place this where I want this to be. Okay, taking a look at this from the side, we can see that might be running into contact with the actual wall of the coffee mug, so I can go ahead and pull this back just a little bit. Okay, and we can see that is placed perfectly. Now we can go ahead and say OK. All right, so there you go. You've got a coffee mug with a decal and emboss, or deboss in this case. You have whipped cream that we simply took apart that we'd already created for cookie cake, and we've scaled that up appropriately. We've got some floating marshmallows that are randomly oriented, and they are on the top of the surface of our hot chocolate liquid. And we have a candy cane for a garnish. So there you go. That's how you create our hot chocolate mug assembly for IED. Good luck and have fun.